Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another day in eyeshadow palette week, where every single day for 7 days straight I am posting some sort of palette themed content. And today I am bringing you 13 eyeshadow palettes throughout my collection that I would declutter if I could get my money back. So I recently did a palette declutter, which I will leave linked down below. So I have decluttered the majority of my palettes in my collection that just were no longer bringing me joy. But I was filming my video yesterday, which was reflecting on all the palettes that I purchased in 2021, and I found myself throughout the video saying I would declutter this if I could get my money back. So I opened up my palette drawers today, looked inside of them, and I was like, okay, if like a magical makeup fairy walked into my room right now and was like, any palette that you want to trade for your full money back, no questions asked, all you have to do is hand over the eyeshadow palette and I'll give you the full amount back, what palettes throughout my collection would I trade for the money back? And I ultimately landed on 13 eyeshadow palettes. There were a couple that I was like, would I or wouldn't I? But I decided, if I was like on the fence, to not include that palette in this video. These are like 13 true palettes that if someone was like, girl, you can have your money back, I would trade it. I would trade my palettes in for the money. So if you're interested in seeing what 13 palettes I have selected, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project painting content, palette themed content, or just chit chatting about makeup, I would love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And if you like bookish content, I recently started a book channel, which I will also have linked down below. But other than that, let's jump into the video. Alright guys, it's getting chilly. It's getting chilly here in Minnesota. It's a chillier day, but I do have my windows open, so if you can hear the cars on the street and stuff, I'm sorry. I'm being selfish and I would rather have the fall breeze than care about the car noises. Okay, I have literally just like a cart in front of me with these palettes, so in no particular order. Let's start with this one right here. This one is from REM Beauty, and I'm actually getting ready to film a ranking all of the last like palettes that I've tried, and I have like a ranking system rather than just like purely me ranking. I'm super excited about that video. I expect that in the next like 10 days or so, but this will be one of the palettes included in that. It is the REM Beauty Go-Go Boots palette, and I've mentioned this on my channel before, but the REM brand in general, for some reason, whenever I walk by it, I feel like I need to purchase something from the brand, just because I'm like, I feel like there's a lot of people interested in this brand. I should pick something up from it. And really, Ariana Grande doesn't really speak to me or call to me. And while I do think the packaging on some of the products is like kind of unique, so like the packaging gets me, there was really no need for me to purchase this eyeshadow palette whatsoever. And I decided to go with the one that had like the blue and the purple because it was different than anything I had in my collection. And realistically, like looking at this palette, how am I supposed to get day-to-day wear out of this? I will say I have done a few looks with this palette and I'm actually rather impressed with the quality, and I will get use out of it. But this is more of a companion palette in that I feel like I have to pair it with another palette. And I wouldn't be sad if this palette went missing. Like, I think it's good quality, and if someone were to say, this color story really speaks to me, Steph, should I buy the eyeshadow palette? I would say go for it because the quality is good and the color story speaks to you. But in terms of like my makeup collection, functionality, how many eyeshadow palettes I already own, this just really doesn't add a lot of value to me, and I would not be sad if it was gone. Therefore, if a magical makeup fairy came into my life and said, Steph, you can have, I don't even know how much this cost, but you can have however much that was back if you give me that palette, I would hand it over in a heartbeat. What else? I'm like looking at this and like in my heart I feel like pain, like I feel bad, but like it is what it is. This is literally just all in good fun. Next up, I have this one from Tom Ford. This is an $88 eyeshadow palette for 4 shades. Literally, what was I thinking when I purchased this? And if I was going to, and by saying I was going to, I obviously did, but like before I purchased this palette, I should have been thinking to myself, if I am going to spend $88 on 4 shades of eyeshadow, let's make sure they're like warm browns or neutral browns that I'm gonna wear every freaking day. That is not what I did. I will say I do really enjoy the 4 shades in this palette, but the quality in this is not so top-notch, so special that I find that this is worth $88. Like, if you're teetering on the edge, like considering Tom Ford, like no, just go buy yourself a couple of eyeshadow palettes that have like 12 shades. So you're getting probably 2 eyeshadow palettes with 12 shades a piece for 24 shades for $80-ish. No, we can keep in like the high-end price tag realm. I have this quad from Pat McGrath. I kept this through my declutter because it's like special enough, and even if I were to like declutter this and try and sell this on like a reseller's website, I'm like, I'm just gonna keep it because I spent the money on it. But it's nothing super spectacular in my opinion, and truthfully I could have gone onto an indie website and ordered like shades similar to these for a much lesser cost. So unless a Pat McGrath eyeshadow palette or quad unless almost every single shade speaks to me and feels unique to my collection, I just need to say no going forward. And that's where I've landed. That's where I've landed with my like relationship with Pat McGrath. So then, speaking of Pat McGrath eyeshadow palettes, I also have this one, which is one of her large 10-pan palettes. And I will say I do like this eyeshadow palette. I get use out of it. I do use it. But if someone offered me $125 for this, I would immediately hand it over, because it's nothing so earth-shattering or special or my everyday palette, or there's not a shade in here that I'm like, oh my god, like I literally need that shade in my collection, that I feel like I wouldn't. The only reason I would be sad is if this the only reason I would be sad if this was missing from my collection is because I would know that I spent so much money on it and it was missing. But it wouldn't be like for the actual shades that I would be missing this palette. So if I could get my money back and trade this, I would declutter that. I have 2 from Natasha Denona, and both are actually midi palettes. Up first I have the Zendo palette. This is just truly nothing special in my opinion. The shades that perform well in this palette I have throughout other palettes in my collection that I prefer over this one. Unfortunately, like the greens and blues just don't perform as well as I wanted to, nor does the shade Zeal down here. So really, I just kind of feel like I wasted $65 on an eyeshadow palette of shades that like I already have. Like there's beautiful shades in here that I do really enjoy, but for $65 back, I would declutter that. And then alongside that, I also have the Natasha Denona Love palette. Now, I do feel like the quality in this, like, there's not a dud shade that I have found in this palette, but in terms of my everyday makeup usage or the way that I consume makeup, I don't use purples like this that often, and I don't reach into pinks and reds, so I just don't get a ton of use out of this eyeshadow palette. I felt like I needed this because so many people raved about this, and I have created looks that I really think are beautiful from this palette, but it's just not something that I'm like inspired by or want to reach for. Therefore, if I could trade this in for my $65 back, I would also do that. Next up, I have this one from Oma Beauty. I purchased this because I was dabbling in all things eyeshadow, wanted to try a brand that I hadn't tried their eyeshadow formula before, and this reminded me of the Sugar Pill Bite Size palette, which I absolutely love and adore, and I really just haven't used this palette, and it's been in my collection for over a year. That's why I'm including this in this video. I don't know what it is about this palette, but I just never find myself feeling inspired to do a colorful look and use this palette. So part of that's on me, like I need to just actually use this, but because this has been in my collection for over a year and I've barely touched it, if I could trade this for my money back, I would. I want to chat about this. So this is the Nomad Cosmetics the Fire and Ice palette, Iceland Fire and Ice. I was not uber impressed with the quality of this, and this is just not a color story I'm reaching for all that often. Now, I would trade this for my money back to then go purchase a different Nomad Cosmetics eyeshadow palette, because I do really love the Nomad aesthetic, the brand in general. I think that they have such a unique concept to their brand, but I've heard their quality has improved with every eyeshadow palette that they have released, and I also have just been more inspired or intrigued by a lot of the more recent eyeshadow palettes. Like the color stories just speak to me more. Therefore, if I could trade this in for another, for not even for my money back, but for a different There's a dog in the hallway. If I could trade this for a different Nomad Cosmetics palette, I would do so. Okay, another indie brand, and I feel like I would trade this for another. So this is from Alien Cosmetics, which is now Unearthly Cosmetics. I purchased this because it was Halloween time, and like it was the packaging that really sold me. The color story just is not something that, like, it's just not in my realm of comfort. So I shouldn't have purchased this. So if I could trade this for a different Unearthly eyeshadow palette, or get my money back and purchase another Unearthly eyeshadow palette, that is what I would do. There's definitely some that I have my eye on, and I'm a little bit disappointed because I just, even looking into this, I'm like, I do want to use this, but like I'm so intimidated by like these 4 shades. Again, beautiful packaging, but I'm just, and like reds, I never do red eyeshadow. So I'm just very intimidated by this palette. Perhaps I just need to like search up some tutorials on YouTube, but if I could trade this for a different palette, I would. Melt Mary Jane, I kind of went back and forth on, but not really, because when I look at this, okay, let me preface this by saying I also really like the Melt Cosmetics aesthetic. I think they take a lot of time in terms of like their packaging and the artwork and all things that go into the product. But I do find that their eyeshadow formula in general just takes a little bit more finessing. It takes a little bit more time. And specifically with this eyeshadow palette, the metallic shades have so much fallout that you, one, have to use an eyeshadow base primer, whatever it might be, if you want any hope of not having eyeshadow literally all over your face. 2, you need to do your eyeshadow before you do your makeup, or your look is just going to be completely ruined. My pizza's almost ready. And it's just like 3, it's just gonna take time to create a look that's well blended and well put together. That being said, I have created some looks that I've really enjoyed using this eyeshadow palette. However, it's a deeper palette. It's just, it's definitely, when I use this palette, I create more intense looks as opposed to like an everyday neutral look. So while it is something that sort of rounds out my Melt Cosmetics collection, it's a bit of a hassle to use, and truly if I could get my like $50-some back for this, I'm fairly confident I would turn this palette over to the Makeup Fairy with the money. All right, we are down to our final 3 palettes. This one, the BPerfect Carnival 3. So I purchased this during a time where I was definitely dabbling with color a lot more than I have lately. And I purchased this thinking it would be a great palette to have in my collection while doing colorful looks, because it offers a large variety of color. And while I do agree with that, I just have not been doing colorful looks, and therefore I find myself literally never reaching for this. Now this did recently get rolled into my Pan and Every palette, so I am now reaching for it because it's in that project. But until that point, this was getting like literally no use for me. And it is a larger palette too, so it's just like bulky and takes up space. And for that reason, I just don't feel like I would be upset if I didn't have this in my collection. I have other colorful palettes that offer a wide variety of color from like Glamlight Cosmetics that I feel like satisfy the same itch that that palette would. Therefore, I'd trade it in for the money. Okay, next up. The only reason I purchased this palette was because it has camo packaging. KKW is not even a brand anymore. I don't know what her rebrand is. Don't really care. I'm not a huge Kardashian person. But I am obsessed with camo print, like literally anything camo print. I've like made jokes, if I could have like a camo wedding dress, I would, which maybe someday I'll get married again in camo. Who knows? The possibility is there. But I purchased this because of the camo packaging. Said I would never declutter it even if I didn't like the quality because of the camo packaging. And now I sit here before you today saying that I don't think the quality on this was superb, and really it should have been, because it's neutral, leaning warm brown shades with like some fun greens. I will say though, I can get use out of this. I can't remember. I actually think I got this on major sale, so I can get this like for a full price back. Maybe, but like I think I paid half or less than half price for this, so like realistically maybe I wouldn't trade this in because I do love the camo packaging. I'm just here to tell you this isn't that great, and I never feel inspired to reach for this. even though it's like easy everyday looks. Easy. Some of the shades don't blend that well. And then the final palette that I have to share with you today is the ColourPop Getting Fresh eyeshadow palette. I was so excited about this eyeshadow palette because of the pops of green. There is something about greens, but then like lime greens or like just neon colors in general just like make my heart happy. So I was super excited about this palette. And again, there's so many other like neutral shades throughout this palette that I was like, oh, I can definitely get a ton of use out of this. I was so disappointed in the quality of this. I feel like a lot of the matte shades, even like the neutrals, are just so chalky that like they blend fine, but it takes a ton of building and it's just like not great. It's not like the great ColourPop formula, it's like the mediocre ColourPop formula. Ouch. And then on top of that, I didn't think the green shades in here performed that well. They weren't as impactful or like punchy as I thought they were going to be. And overall, I just thought that this palette in general was like a big letdown. And I believe I ordered this off the ColourPop website. And I'm also just not a big returner. Like I cannot tell you the last time I actually returned a piece of makeup, but if someone offered me my money back for this, in a heartbeat, because it's larger and it isn't great quality. I have other greens throughout my collection I can use. I have plenty of other neutrals in my collection similar to that I can use, so would trade my money, or would trade my palette for my money back. But after that, those are the 13 eyeshadow palettes throughout my collection that I personally would trade for my money back. I would declutter if I could get my full money back. I would love to know, do you have any palettes throughout your eyeshadow palette collection that you would declutter if you could get your money back? Let's chat about it in the comments below. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I'll catch you in my tomorrow's video. Bye.